Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language. It was birthday week in both of our houses for a couple of girl childs, my youngest. Anyone else? I think that those are the main ones. Yeah, so two kids in my house, 1 kid in your house. Katie, how is the birthday girl, and how was birthday week for her?
Good but long. I think her best friend's birthday was this week too, so I think they're pretty partied out. My child has not realized yet that we did not host a friend party for her, but her best friend's party was Saturday, so they had all the same people there that they would have anyway, so it seemed kind of excessive to throw another one the next day with the same kids.
That would be a lot.
She doesn't really care. So I figured that eventually she'll figure out that we didn't have a friend party, and when that happens, we'll have a friend party. And then it'll be in like late January or something when we need something fun to do.
Or she might just forget.
I mean, she got presents. It's not like, she got cake, she got presents.
Right, yeah, you didn't skip it completely.
Yeah, she got to tell everyone that she's 8 now, which is apparently totally grown up. But,
Yes, she's ready for all kinds of things now.
Yeah. She also had a full-on meltdown because we force her cruelly and horribly to buckle herself in a car, but we don't make her brother buckle himself in, and it's not fair.
So she's pretty grown up, but not always.
But not grown up enough to buckle herself in a car. It's a real hardship. So.
Rough times.
Yeah, it really is. I figure if that's the best she can complain about, I'm doing pretty well. Yep. How was birthday week in your house?
It was good. So my daughter was away, so we talked on FaceTime, and it had actually worked out that I got to see my sister a week or so before her birthday, before my daughter's birthday, and was able to send a package back with her that she could get to my daughter because she lives closer. Because of I think I've mentioned it before, the Canada Strike Post is ongoing, so it means that I couldn't send I could send some stuff on Amazon, but I couldn't send anything personalized or from my house that wasn't just shipped to her. So that worked out well. So there were some rules about when she was allowed to open things, and she's 19 now, which means that's drinking age where we live. So she went out with her friends for dinner and out to the local country bar. So she finally gets to be a university student like the rest of her housemates. And then our youngest turned double digits on the weekend too. They're only 3 days apart. So that felt like a big deal too. So he did have a friend party on the weekend, and then is having the grandparents over some night this week for the family party. And he's mature enough at this point that he said he didn't want his birthday presents from us on his birthday because we were having his friend party that day, and he wanted to spread out the presents. So delayed gratification. Apparently that happens at about 10. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Made another cake today because there wasn't enough leftover cake from the friend party to extend to the grandparents, but there was lots of icing, so it all worked out. I just had to make one more cake.
I've apparently gotten old because I found myself actually scraping the frosting off the cake that we had for the girl child's birthday because there was so much of it and it was so sugary. And it was not a homemade cake, it was a Walmart special because it's been a busy week. So
too much icing. And in other news, I've been helping a friend with some catering work at a Christmas tree farm, which has been fun. I enjoy working with her, and she has some other great employees, so it was good. And it's neat to be in a place where mostly everyone is happy to be there. I mean, you could hear the tantruming children in the surroundings, right? I always feel sorry for those people where they're like trying to make a Christmas memory, and then their toddler or preschoolers having a real hard time about something, not wanting to wear mittens or having fallen in the snow or whatever it is that set them off. But it was also real cold because we were set up outside, so it was some long days out in the wind. I tried to layer up, but it's just a different style of work too, right? You kind of get used to the same routine, and then when you do something else, I was standing on concrete for our whole shift, and then being out in the cold, it was definitely a new kind of sore at the end of the day, but it was good overall. Got to sell lots of hot chocolate and cookies.
I've noticed how bad my shins hurt now when I go to the city for anything, and you spend all day walking on concrete instead of on dirt like we do at home. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, and I kind of thought I was used to it because milking, I mean, I guess we have mats on the ground, so it's not like concrete, but I do spend a lot of time on hard surfaces. But I think it's also partly the standing still aspect, right? Where you're in one position and just, standing at the cash register and ringing people through. So yeah, it was good. Those little hand warmers are definitely a big help, except the problem is we're using one of those, like an electronic cash machine thingy. Most people can just tap, which is nice, a lot easier than making change. But I couldn't find a pair of gloves, even the ones that had those little things that are supposed to be touchscreen friendly, that the machine would actually recognize. So I was mostly barehanded. So anytime I had a moment, I would stick my hands back in my pockets. But yeah, some cold fingers. And then making change was really hard when people did actually come through with cash. It's like, really? Is this close enough? Here's a wad of coins.
Yeah, yeah. Like, how about if we just agree that this is a donation to some charitable organization?
Yeah, you want to tip me, right? I'll give you the bills. But then loonies and toonies add up quick too. So yeah, people do want their big coins at least. The dimes were the ones that my frozen fingers were having a hard time picking up. All right, should we welcome our guest for this week?
Sounds good.
Today we are excited to be talking to Jake Yancey, who's joining us from Washington State. And Jake, we start each of our interviews with the exact same question. So this is your way to introduce yourself to our listeners. We always ask, what are you growing? So usually for farmers, that's crops and livestock, but can also be kids and businesses and all kinds of other stuff. So Jake, what are you growing?
We grow cattle and we have horses, and then we got a whole family as well.
Yeah. So what kind of cattle are we talking about? Farmers, they want to know breeds and size and all that kind of stuff.
So we operate a cow calf to finish program. So we raise our cows all the way from breeding all the way through calving. And then we maintain them all the way through harvest. We run mainly a black baldy mixed herds, some Hereford influence, but historically last couple of years we've been breeding mainly Angus bulls.
And about how many? I know that, talking about the exact numbers of acres and head of cattle and all that kind of stuff can be tricky for people, but just so people have an idea of scale, kind of what numbers you're talking about.
Yeah, so we run about 120 head and market just under about 50 a year.
And you said family, so what size of kids are we talking about too?
So we are blessed with twin daughters. They're both 16 years old, so really, really lucky.
So I have a 16-year-old as well. And does that mean you're teaching and getting to be passenger for two people who are learning how to drive?
So I think our daughters have been driving since I know they couldn't even touch the pedals in the fields. So driving came pretty good with them. And yeah, they've been driving now for 6 months or so. So it's been a nice liberating for us as parents. And I think taxing for them as kids as they end up now getting tasked with some more roles, but a lot of freedom for them.
Yes. Yeah. While you're out, yes, you can borrow the vehicle, but follow this list of things that you need to get while you're off the farm. Yeah, I get that. I found though that with mine, I'm on my second one who's 16 now. They while they maybe had the capacity to drive, their actual knowledge of the rules of the road were maybe like a little bit lacking because just because you know how to steer and hit the brakes and the gas doesn't mean they always knew exactly what happened when you went to town.
Route selection is often interesting, what routes they end up taking, because they know some very familiar ones, but the quick and easy ones, they have no clue. So it's been clear that these 16 years, they have not been paying a lot of attention while they've been sitting behind, not driving.
Yeah, that's right. I know where that place is, but I'm not sure how to get there.
Arlene, in their defense, plenty of grown adults don't seem to have a real great handle on the rules of the road either. So,
yeah, that's true.
Very true.
I've been doing some more highway driving with my oldest lately, and she gets very annoyed when people don't use their signal for lane changes. And I'm thinking she's just going to have to get used to that because there's a lot of people who don't do it.
So Jake, whereabouts in Washington are you, and what is the weather like where you are generally year round? Because I know, especially with grazing, it makes a big difference if you get snow or not, or rain or not. And I like to clarify.
Yeah, so we operate in South Puget Sound. We operate in a 4 county area that we operate in. So we have a bunch of different soil types and such that we have. We kind of, our average rainfall is anywhere between about 60 up to, depending on the areas and the time of the year, up to 110 inches of rain a year. Our downfall that we tell folks, in context, as you've kind of referenced, is super important when you talk about ranching and farming and any of these concepts. Our biggest downfall is in Western Washington here. We don't get any rain really since about May, June. The spigot shuts off, and we don't get anything until rain's just really started here about a week or so ago, and it's currently October. So it's not uncommon for us to go October, mid-October. So our growing season is we drought out during the growing season. And every couple of years we go through a certified drought here. So you have a very short growing season, as much rain as we have. And then our growing temps end up going away. So we're just now on the tail end of that right now, as our nighttime temperatures are getting down just above freezing, and daytimes are running right now in October. We're looking mid 50s to mid 60s. So we're kind of on the tail end. We've pretty much lost our growing season for fall here already.
All right. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about prescribed conservation grazing and why you do it? Because I know, like, all these more intensive practices, you could just toss them out there. So I always like to hear why people choose to do more work.
Yeah, I think there's about there's got to be about probably 60 different terms and everything else that folks end up using. Everything from holistic to intensive management to managed grazing to prescribed grazing. You can pretty much put a tag on anything. Our operations 100% ran on lease ground, and most of that ground has some sort of endangered species on it. 2/3 of it does. And then at the same time, we work really close with our scientific community here locally, our collegiate community, as well as land managers, to really work on targeting specific needs that those properties have. And so the way that we kind of describe our grazing program is prescribed conservation grazing. The reason why we use those 3 words is they're easy to understand and folks understand it, and we can explain it. The reason why we describe the first part as prescribed is each property kind of has its own goals. Some of those properties may be for wildfire mitigation, that we're taking care of reducing the vegetative load, so we're not having catastrophic fires. We've had a couple even here in Western Washington with as much rain as we've had. In the last couple of years, we've had some really big ones. And nationwide, I think we're suffering from a fire issue nationwide. Some of our properties, for like the Oregon spotted frog that's endangered, the prescription for that is the Oregon spotted frog likes to graze the grass super, super short in the fall. And so we need to get that grass super short before the growing season kicks off in the spring. But at the same time, we have to manage the water levels where we end up grazing. So we're not grazing in the water. So we're just now in October, we're just pulling out of those grounds as the rains have now just started to come back. But we've ensured that the grass is super short. So in spring, when the sun comes out and the waters start to warm up in that short, shallow water, that those Oregon spotted frog, which are endangered, really can set a whole bunch of eggs, ovipositioning sites, and really kick off. And then we deal with some different stuff with our prairie habitats. We target rat-tailed fescue, which is a cool season annual that's taken over a lot of our prairies. And for it, we graze it super, super heavy in the spring because it's a cool season annual, and don't allow it to go to seed. And so that's really a couple of the different prescriptions that we use depending on the needs of those properties. The reason why we also like to use the word prescription is, like I said, we deal with a lot of conservation partners, the scientific community, and everything else. And we describe it much like if you or I had a heart issue and we had to take blood thinners. It's all for the greater good that we're taking those blood thinners. We're not going to probably die from a heart attack, which is a good thing. But at the same time, there's some trade-offs and some downfalls. And so we don't try to shy away from grazing not having its downfalls, just like every ag industry and stuff. There are downfalls in agriculture. But I think ultimately, for most producers, they're doing it for the greater good and things are working out better. The conservation side of things, a lot of the work that we're doing is, like I said, with endangered species, even to include not only our grazing regime that we do, but some of our fence construction methods. So we do tilt up fences to allow wildlife to walk right underneath our fences with 12-foot passageways. We open all of our gates up, and we do just a lot of stuff based on wildlife interests. And then obviously prescribed conservation grazing. The last part of it involves a whole bunch of cows. And so we always tell this to our conservation partners. We think the scientific community, the government, and everybody else, their money is best spent on investing in producers, investing in our land, doing studies to make sure that what we're doing is correct. It's not spent on going out there with brush cutters and mowing things for us and everything else when we have livestock and other tools that we can put on the ground, all while producing a product that we can sell in our communities.
I like the description of prescribed as well, because it really highlights how individual things are, from property to property, from weather, from endangered animals to endangered plants, to what species you're putting out there, what breed you're putting out there, where they are in their production cycle. That, if all three of us here on the show today have high blood pressure, we're not probably going to get the same prescription for all three of us, because we're not the same person. And it can be real easy to fall into that trap of, well, this works great for so-and-so, but they're in Eastern Oregon and they get rain, 52 weeks a year, and they don't get snow, and, it's flatter. I don't know what Eastern Oregon looks like, but, if I live on the side of a mountain in a desert, my grazing is not going to look like theirs, and it can be real easy to tell people the best way to do it, but a lot of folks seem to miss that you have to be in the same system for it to work the same way, and that's not good or bad. It's just different, and some places it's definitely advantageous. But
we even go as far as to say that sometimes even just seasonally it can change. We work, like I said, one of our joys is because we're in a 4-county area that we move our cattle fairly often. Every month and a half to 2.5 months, our cattle are loading up on a trailer and moving to a different area. And so they're getting onto a different soil type often, and even sometimes grass structure. And those dates aren't set by a calendar. They're set sometimes by growth cycles, by how much sun we've got, how the soil's drying out. All of those type of things play into it. So you are correct. Prescriptions are very much something that you constantly monitor with your doctor. And just the same as a producer and working with your partners and stuff, we constantly are adjusting and figuring out what's working and what needs tweaked.
So do you see a difference in mineral consumption in your cattle depending on what soil type you're on, or does it not make that much of a difference?
As far as uptake and stuff, our uptake is fairly consistent throughout the seasons. We see a lot of uptake in spring when we end up turning out. We have a lot of what we call water grass. We get so much rain, the grass has high water content. So not a lot of good structure in there. It's not like I come from a background of range grazing in Eastern Washington, where the grasses were much more nutritious, much more mineral rich and everything. Western Washington, we just grow a lot of green. It looks beautiful, and sometimes it just doesn't have the amazing feed value. And that's something that for the layman and stuff, sometimes they don't understand that green grass is sometimes not the best feed from a producer standpoint. That's kind of a hard thing to wrap your head around sometimes. But we grow lots of green grass, and sometimes it's not as best. We use a consistent mineral program, but yeah, we see pretty consistent mineral uptake in the spring. We incorporate fly control. We use garlic. And so we incorporate that right into our mineral. And so that we think, as we've kind of changed over the years, kind of what we're using, we think the cattle kind of enjoy that and kind of get used to that. So we see a peak of mineral consumption in the spring, and then we see a little bit in the fall. And once again, I kind of attribute a lot of that to how much water grass that they're end up eating.
I know we feed garlic salt too, and I like to joke that it's good because your steak is pre-seasoned then when it goes to slaughter, because it's been eating garlic salt the whole time. It does definitely, I can tell when my husband has used my car to bring mineral home, because between the kelp for the sheep and the garlic salt for the cattle, it can be pungent. Especially if it's sat in there when it's warm out, it can be real special.
My wife has described her vehicle as being a bad Italian restaurant some days. So, yes, I feel your pain.
Some farm things are pretty universal, I think. And your car smelling funny seems to be one of them.
So, Jake, what is your background when it comes to agriculture? I mean, I think you mentioned, or we know that you're first generation, but it sounds like obviously you have a lot of experience. So where did you get your passion for this lifestyle?
So I was born down the Columbia River, which is in between Washington and Oregon, and then spent most of my childhood over in Eastern Washington, a little town called Starbuck. So we had 200 people in the whole entire town. Just FYI, no relationship to Starbucks coffee, but there's 200 people.
Yeah, I'm guessing with that many people, there's not a Starbucks either.
No Starbucks. School had about 34 kids when I was going through it, preschool through 8th. So super small town in the heart of rangeland grazing and wheat production. And I kind of joke that I grew up where we get 10 inches of rain and I live where we get 110 inches of rain. So I've been now on the both sides. Graduated over on the west side of the state, and that's kind of how I got my feet wet the first time. Was really active in FFA. Attended Washington State University, and then went on to Walla Walla Community College, where I got my farrier certificate to be a horseshoer. And throughout that time, I spent about 5 years working in different management and operational roles of ranches, everything from cow-calf to working a calving season over on the east side, working a finishing feedlot operation in central Washington, and then finishing off everything at a guest ranch operation up in Republic, Washington. So kind of got to see a little bit of everything. And then that kind of saga of my life kind of stopped in about 2001 when I went on to the corporate world and ended up getting a job. And then kicked back off again in 2015. And I can kind of tell you that transition if you want to know as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, married my wonderful wife in 2005. And then in 2015, a buddy of mine, Washington State is suffering just like across our country with a lot of ranches that are being sold for development and such. And in 2015, one of my friends' family ranch was being sold, and he called me up in November of 2015 and said, "Hey, I got a cow-calf herd. I need to get rid of it. I have 30 days. They're going to develop our property and been sold. Are you interested in it?" And I told my wife, I said, "You already probably made one bad decision by marrying me the first time. Let's jump into a second bad one, and let's pick up a cow-calf herd in Western Washington with a ton of rain in November with no feed and really no property. We had five acres that we live on. And I said, trust me, I'll make it work." Well, my wife said, "Heck, I made one bad decision. Let's go with a second." So she trusted me. And so that first year we brought the cow-calf herd back to our 5 acres. We cleared out a horse pasture and we made it work. We hauled hay in round bales we fed to haul it out in the pasture. We used the 70s pickup truck hood tied to our quad and we rolled them onto it and we made it work. There's no excuses. And that first winter, we were kind of laughing, how the heck are we going to make this work as far as land? And so we kind of joked that I'm the Jehovah's Witness of cattlemen, that we literally would just look at maps and see where people were mowing and everything else. And I'd go knock on doors and I'd tell people, "Hey, you have this property that you're spending money every year mowing. You have this property that has these issues on it. You have this property that has some fences that needs repaired. What if I came in and I'm not going to charge you for the mowing? I'm not going to charge you for the weed management. I'm not going to charge you for the woody encroachment controls. I'm not going to charge you for the invasive management. As a matter of fact, I'm going to fix some of these fences. We're going to make a commitment to each other. We're going to set down some management goals that you as a property owner and manager want to see. And then you're going to trust me." And I'm blessed to have some great landowners and partners and conservation groups that kind of bought on with that. And that first year we picked up about 125 acres. And today we're just over 1,000 acres that we end up managing with those same relationships. And so I couldn't be more blessed with that. Land prices in our area are astronomical. It starts at 10 grand an acre for grazing soils. That's not tillable soils, which is insane. And in our area, it takes about 10 acres to graze a cow through the 6-month grazing season that we have, because like I said, it gets too wet in the winter. So yeah, that's kind of the saga.
Jake, I have to say it's really nice to hear someone talk positively about the landowners they work with, because I feel like we hear so much negativity, and especially if, God forbid, you make the mistake of going on social media, and I mean, there are definitely some shitty landowners out there, for sure, but, you hear these people where every landowner they've ever run into is the worst, and you're like, maybe it's you. Like, what's that saying about if everything smells like dog poop, maybe you should check your shoes, because maybe it's not the rest of the world that stinks.
So at this point, Jake, how many different landowners are you actually working with in terms of those partnerships you're talking about?
I think it's probably about 15 different landowners. And I think total we have just over 50 different pastures and properties that we do. Some of the conservation groups that we work with, they own multiple properties that we've worked on, that those relationships normally start with one property and have grown. Often the parcel sizes and stuff continue to increase if property owners have adjacent stuff. And normally they're always interested, hey, can we add this on? Can we add this on? And everything else. Kate, going back to your statement, and I think it goes back to kind of what we describe as the prescribed conservation grazing, and I touched on it. We don't beat around the bush about telling people that our relationship, just like a marriage or anything else, is not going to be perfect. I am the farthest one and stuff from being perfect in this whole world and stuff, and things are going to go wrong with grazing, just as things are going to go wrong with farming or anything that you end up doing. And the main thing that we tell our property owners is communicate with me. Let's talk it through. Let's work on goals. Let's set those. Let's revisit them. And so one of the big things that we do is social media has been really weird. I have a love-hate relationship, I think, like most folks my generation or older do. But it's the way that we tell our story. And so we take tons and tons of photos. And I think one of the big things that all of us have a tendency to do is we think about the now and we forget to reflect and look back on what was. And so we use photographs to do that a lot. And so at the end of each one of our years, we show before and after photographs to our property owners. So often when they maybe see ruts in a field that, like last year, we got a shipment of cattle delayed by 3 days. And that we had a rainstorm coming in, dump inches of rain during then. And by the time we got corrals out and everything else, it rutted up the field. A year later, that same spot, we revisited that and took the same photos where it was rutted and looking nasty and everything torn up and everything. And we revisit that and look back on it and we reflect on it and we tell our property owners, hey, remember this photo? It's a terrible one to reflect on. And maybe it was the argument that you as a couple had or whatever. But we look back on that and go, remember that thing that was really bad that we thought was the worst thing in the whole wide world? Well, look at it today and look at it where it is now. And when we found that you look back on those things and look at those before and afters, it really, really helps.
That makes a lot of sense. If someone is looking at using land that they don't own as an opportunity, what are some of the things that you think are a priority in terms of when you make that first contact with a property owner? Like what kind of time commitment, or how do you kind of have those conversations with someone that maybe you don't know, but you're putting a lot of trust in them that, if you're going to invest in fencing and those types of things, that they're not going to turn around and sell it the next year. So how would people approach those conversations?
Arlene, you touched on it early in this, that kind of one of the hot topics of talking to ranchers or talking to farmers is asking those questions about how many cows you have or how many acres you have. And I think it's one of those things that historically we've always kind of shied away from talking business and money and numbers. That's the first thing that we open up those conversations with our property owners with, is we go, hey, this is my net revenue from raising and selling and marketing a cow from the time that it's bred to the time that it's harvested. And that's a 3-year process. You got 9 months for the breeding process before it has a calf. Then we got about 2 years before finishing. And when we talk about a net profit at the end of that, when everything's said and done, and that's hoping that everything works out between $300 and $500 per cow. We tell folks, like, those are real numbers. And those are not rolling in money type numbers by any means. And there's a lot of variables. Does that cow even make it alive? Does sickness not get it? Does injury not get it? Any of those things. And so when we talk to our property owners, that's one of the things that we're very, very open with them. And it's one of the things that we report every year when we tell them is, hey, this is how many grazing days that we got out of your property. And we tell them that, hey, you might have 40 acres, but if we're able to only put 20 head of cattle out there and they're only able to graze out there for a month and a half the first year, here's what we're making for a daily gains projected. Here's what the market value of that is. And here's the expenses that we have to haul in and haul out. And we even break it down that I tell folks when I drop off cattle, I think in my back of my head as a business manager and stuff, that's $200 to $250 every trailer load, just in my time, equipment, between my truck depreciation, my trailer, and all that. And those are real numbers. So when folks call up and say, hey, I got a couple acres that I'm interested in moving cattle on, we really quickly sit them down and go through those numbers. And we also talk about that as far as the management of their property, as far as, hey, these are realistic improvements that we're going to make on your property. None of our properties, even our most glorious properties, did we go in on year one and put all new fences in on their property. Most of them, we rely on a ton of electric fence, and we describe it as historical fences or around many of these old properties that the management practice has been simply to hire the guy down the road with a brush hog to mow the insides of the field and do no fence maintenance. And so the historical fences are there. We can see them. But if a cow wants to knock on them, they'll fall over. And so, but we have those honest conversations about business and money with our property owners. And sometimes those are walkaways that we don't get all of those conversations and all of those properties that we go and talk to. But it creates two different things. One is it helps to, I think, educate our general public about what ranching and farming and stuff truly is. Even if we walk away and we don't have a deal, it helps them to get a little bit better understanding of that. The second thing that it can sometimes do is it actually generates some business for us. Sometimes folks are like, you know what, I'm not interested in having your cows on your property, but in November, can I order beef from you? And so that's been a win-win. And really often when we tell folks what we're doing, they become kind of champions for agriculture for us and kind of help to change that for us. And so that's been overall, it's been a great relationship that we've been able to get. So Kate, you are right. There are some property owners that we have different management hurdles with, but normally those are based on communication, that we either haven't communicated clearly enough to them and we take ownership on that. And sometimes I believe that maybe they have some iota on that they maybe haven't communicated their true desires and needs and everything else as well. But we're blessed. As of today, none of our properties we've lost to management decisions or anything else. The only properties that we've lost have been to development. And once again, we don't own these properties, and we embrace that property owners have a right to do what they want, regardless of what my personal feelings are. But we recognize that property owners can do what they want with their properties.
I think generally the more open we can be with customers, the better, whether we're direct marketing meat or, I mean, you're essentially direct marketing grazing services to folks. And I know that, having direct marketed meat that people see, $18 a pound on lamb chops, and they're like, I'm like, but there's 5 pounds of chops in one lamb, and I spent how many hours raising the damn thing, and I'm not, I promise I'm not living in a McMansion, Scrooge McDucking my way around through a room full of gold here, there's a lot of explanation to do with a lot of folks, but I think most folks do get it once you explain it in terms that they understand, because I know it can be really frustrating, and it's a hell of a lot easier to just go, I'm not making any damn money. But that doesn't really convey reality to anybody, and it's not helpful.
Well, and we make it clear to our property owners and stuff. Agriculture really has to make money. If you as a producer are not making money, it's not a business, and it's a charity, and that's something. There's numerous days. I think the fleeting thoughts come across all of our heads at some time. It might be the middle of winter when the snows are falling and it's nasty. It might be when we just lost a calf in a bad calving incident. It might be any of those times where we always think of the alternative that, man, there's not much of a margin here. Let's stop. And you got to get, this has to be a business that makes money. And so when we talk to our property owners, it can't be a break even. It's got to be in our best interest. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for us. And like you said, okay, we don't have to be rolling in Scrooge McDuck type money by any means, nor are we. So, but that's agriculture. It has to make money. Otherwise, farms die.
It's bizarre, though, that there seems to be so much shame both from consumers and producers about farms making money. Like, it's this thing that we should be doing just out of the noble goodness of our hearts, which, fine, but also my bank doesn't take noble thoughts as payment on stuff. You know, my house painting contractor probably would not like my positive thinking rather than the check that I need to send him today. It doesn't get you very far.
And Kate, I think part of that's a knock on myself as a producer, and I think producers overall is often we think about the only gains often in business. When you work for someone, the only gain is what you get at that twice a month when you get your paycheck. And I think one of the things that we as producers have failed to sometimes tell that story is all the added benefits that we've created. I mean, 2/3 of our property have endangered species on them that we're right now actively, not only are we producing a product and stuff, but our ovipositioning sites that's the egg laying locations for the Oregon spotted frog, which started out in the single digits. We're now up over 50 in some of our properties, and those are expanding. And that's all while using grazing and not costing taxpayers and everything else for the management of those endangered species. Issues like rat-tail fescue, we've completely eliminated the spraying of chemicals and the use of petro tractors on that soil and stuff, just simply by using grazing. At the same time, every one of our properties since 2015, every year, and I don't know how it's happened every year, because soil heat days have gone up and down, water days have gone up and down, but every one of our properties every single year has slowly increased in the number of grazing days, meaning the productivity of that soil has continued to increase. And so, yeah, are we making money? Yeah. But I think the bigger thing that we really have to tell our story and stuff to those folks that maybe think only about those twice a month paychecks that we get in a normal corporate style job is that we as producers often are creating so much amazing habitat for species. We're increasing the soil productivity that's below our feet. And when I walk away, that soil is still going to be better than it was before. And us as producers nationwide, we're producing more food on less acres every single year. And so that really says a lot to the management, I think, that's going on. And I think we as producers have to tell that story, that it's not just about the money and cents. It's all of the extras that we end up getting. One of the groups I'm part of, we do a bunch of stuff with Working Lands for Wildlife type programs. And one of the things that we find is some of the biggest open spaces that we have right now in some states are all agricultural land. So where you have your deer and birds and everything else and frogs, those are all on working lands. And so there's value in that. And I think that often we only think about it as the steak that shows up in our in there, or the farmer that's got the brand new green tractor that's out there. And we kind of miss some of those added benefits. They're benefits to us as a whole society.
Our goal as podcasters is to create a program that makes you feel less alone as a farming, ranching, or homesteading parent, but we can't do it alone.
Supporting Barnyard Language on Patreon helps us cover production costs and ensures the future of the show, but you'll also gain access to exclusive perks and behind-the-scenes content.
Your support enables us to continue bringing you the thought-provoking conversations and inspiring stories week after week. So if you find value in what we're doing and want to be part of the Barnyard community, head over to patreon.com/barnyardlanguage and choose a tier that suits you.
It's easy to look at, national parks or state parks or, conservation areas, those types of things as being the only place where conservation is happening, but that's just not accurate, right? There's conservation happening by lots of different people, and it's not always by governments or NGOs. On that topic, you talked about working with academia and with community partners. And, we've talked about the fact that farms need to make money. Are grants part of those conservation type projects? Is there money that comes from those types of programs that helps you in your business? Because I think that is a place where farmers really need to start looking more carefully at, in terms of, if we are providing a greater good to society and there's money out there for that, then I don't think there's definitely no shame in that. We should be helping each other to apply for and get that money to the people who are doing the work.
It's a love-hate relationship. I barely have time to work a job and work the ranch and everything else at the same time and raise kids and juggle all that, let alone I just got sent over some more paperwork to maybe think about filling out. It's 42 pages. And I'm like, holy bejeebus. How the heck do you expect me to fill 42 pages out with the possibility that there might be money at the end of that 42 pages? That's rough as a producer.
And if you mess up one little part, then someone is just going to move it to the no pile, and you might be doing the thing that they want to pay you for anyway. But it's just about whether you administratively got everything perfect or not.
Now I'm just wondering if I could get my kids' teachers to accept my kids filling out my NRCS paperwork as homework.
Yeah.
No, Arlene, we have used some programs. COVID was a benefit for us. It really helped us with an investment in. We have a portable corral system that we use. So each of our properties, and a historical ranch always has a corral system at it that you bring cattle in. You're able to doctor them and everything else. We have a fully portable one. It's called a Rawhide. They're out of Kansas. It's basically an accordion trailer that we arrive at the properties. It accordions out. We can work all of our cattle. It's got a head gate on it. We can give shots, vaccines, anything that we need to treat right there on scene. And when we're done, we accordion and back up and drive off. And it's probably saved a marriage, and it's probably saved my kids from hating me, because we also have a pile of panels that for years we moved in and out of trailers and set up and tore down and had fall over and broke and replaced and repaired and all those things.
Probably kept y'all from getting injured too.
Oh God, yeah. So we've been able to use some grants and programs like that. Some of them have paid for one of our different properties that we've been on. They've assisted with fencing and cross fencing, which has been a huge one. One of the properties that we're now managing helped to pay for watering sites, so increase the amount of watering locations because we do a rotational grazing style program as the plants kind of dictate. And so water access is one of our big primary things. But we were just down in Redmond's at Partners for Fish and Wildlife Partners Day 2024. And one of the things that we saw down there in Redmond was they'd invested a ton of money in building reservoirs and capacity. They talked a lot about building capacity, that we're always working on building capacity and everything. And then what they found in the Redmond area is they used to use, just like they use across the country, lots of channels and everything else to move water and get it to the producers. And so the delivery. And the problem is they found that, man, there were a lot of leaky canals and a lot of loss, and it just takes water to move water. It didn't make sense to me, but they call it carry water. And so there was carry water, and that's kind of like for the layman that may not know, it's kind of like moving a rubber ducky. You have to shoot so much water at it to get the rubber ducky to move, and then you have to shoot extra water to get the duck to move along the ground. And so there's this carry water. Well, in Oregon, they came up and they put pipe in now. So now they have this big 9 foot tall pipe that takes the water up in the hills and then sends it down to the producers. And so they've got rid of all that loss, and they've really invested heavily in pipelines. And I tell whenever I meet with my government partners and the folks that are working on these grants and everything else, that often we focus on building capacity. It's all about, hey, let's build all these different opportunities. And what I tell folks is Oregon was a great example. Work on the delivery, invest on the pipelines, on how do we get it to there. Man, if I as a producer I often describe some of my government partners that are great, but I describe them as a car dealer that often they have a ton of different grants and programs, and they'll come and put things on and they'll tell you they have this and that and everything else. And I'm like, man, if you really wanted to sell that, what you do is what a car dealer does is you walk in and that car dealer fills everything out. And unfortunately, they tell you to sign right there. But those 42 pages, they know way better than I do what those 42 pages are. And we can sit down and have a conversation that takes part of the day. And at the end, we can both walk away with, one, them not being frustrated that they have to correct my work, as you stated, Kate, and send back to me because I missed something or I put something in or interpreted it wrong. And ultimately, they can pipeline that money right into producers and stuff like you, I, or everybody else that's listening, that's out there, and get it on the ground. And the more that we can invest in those pipelines, also just like those canal systems, the more lack of loss that we have as it's going from those reservoirs out there to those people. Because every time they have to send something back to us for a correction, or sometimes we don't get it, or they can't put the money on the ground, often we end up losing that money. So I think there's true interest in getting it on the ground. It's there for reasons. And really helps to improve these processes.
And especially when you're talking about those programs where they expect you to put money up front and buy things or complete projects before the money comes through, like that's just a risk that most people can't take. There's too much, like we said before, the margins are too tight that you can't invest in something that you can't guarantee that you're going to get reimbursed for.
We were blessed. We always say that there's a ton of different projects and funding options that sound great. We went through a drought 2 years ago, and we're able to receive some drought assistance, which is great. By the time we ended up getting that money, it was over 12 months after that drought cycle had occurred. And that was because people had changed. They had filled out paperwork wrong on their end. We couldn't get hold of people. They're on vacation and everything else. And meanwhile, as you know, as producers, we're still out that money on the front end and stuff, and we have to make those decisions. And if I made those tough decisions and didn't know that I had a possibility of drought funds coming in the back end, I would have maybe liquidated cattle and got rid of stuff and not been able to do as much work on the ground as we're doing. So really, there's a lot of room for improvement there, I think.
Yes, that's right.
That's assuming positive intent.
I think, too, Jake, one thing I've been thinking about a lot, because I work in tech and I work remotely from rural Iowa, is how much of that delivery loss we're seeing on young people in small towns. Because, like, we're seeing all these kids, our school's been lucky and has some really good tech programming in the elementary and the high school. And there's all this funding to teach all these kids all this tech and all this great, cool education that we're doing, but there hasn't been any funding for getting those kids into professional development when they graduate. So we're dumping all this money in, but we don't have any way to deliver them to making money off everything they've learned. And I don't mean getting them into four-year colleges, because I don't have a tech degree, but Microsoft hired me anyway. But just that seems like a problem all over rural areas, of having plenty of resources for a lot of things, but not having effective ways to utilize them.
Kate, completely right. Like I said, I have two wonderful daughters, and both of them are incredibly smart. And both of them are kind of at this point, it's still early in their life, but they're both kind of envisioning life going in different directions. And one wants to go the college route, which we support. And like I said, I didn't finish college. I went 2 years of college, and one of those years I doubled up and got my farrier certificate, and became a horseshoer. And so I never finished a 4-year degree or anything else. And much of the knowledge that I have is actually working. My other daughter, she's decided that she wants to go the trades route. And one of the things that we have done as parents and stuff, is we've incorporated our kids a lot in the business. If it's writing newsletters or anything else, we tell them all the time, like, you get assigned these assignments in school, and often they're just assignments to make an assignment. And we're like, God, if you want an assignment about marketing a product, here, market our product and see what that looks like. If you want an assignment on figuring out math and costs and everything else, perfect. Do the production costs for us for the year. Figure those things out. Because those are all things as producers that we have a responsibility to do. But man, if we can share some of that load, and at the same time, they can, as students, they can learn some of those things. Man, what great learning opportunity there is, Kate. So very much so.
Yeah, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm like anti 4-year degrees, but I feel like a lot of our generation was pushed real hard into, if you don't get a 4-year degree, you will be a failure. And if you've tried to hire a roofer or a plumber or a welder or anything recently, I think we can see where that's gotten us. But I don't think I've met anyone who said, well, learning to deal with people and learning to deal with money and be able to do math and know about the weather has just really been a real crap thing for me. I wish I knew less about all this, and I think the more we can expose our kids to the world, the better, because this is just my justification for asking Mrs. Acevedo if Henry, my boy child, can just start doing my NRCS paperwork for his homework.
Kate, we're blessed. One daughter that wants to go to college, and I really tip my hat to her, because I've told her, hey, whatever you guys want to do, I'm all for supporting it. My one daughter, she wants to be a heavy equipment operator, and so we just did a trade day with her where she got to run excavators and backhoes and everything else, and she's that is her cat's meow. But my other daughter wants to go to college, and she just got an assignment at school that they told her, hey, pick a subject and debate it. Write a paper with the pros and cons of it. And she could have chose anything. She's a 16-year-old girl. She could have chose black horses over white horses or whatever. But I tip my hat to her. She came in the other day and we were talking, and she said, you know what, Pop? She goes, I've decided I'm going to do it on the pros and cons of going to college over going to something else. And I'm like, you know what? That is a super, super smart thing for you to do. And I went to college. There's a ton of life lessons that come out of there. And I'm not one to, I'm with you, Kate. There's not a right and wrong way to learn in this world. But both ways cost. Both ways cost. And you just need to figure out where that value is for you and what you're wanting to do and all those type of things. So I'm happy that my daughter's taking the time to maybe reflect on some of those things.
What I should say is I have nothing at all against 4-year schools or trade schools or not going to college or anything, but it's the doing it because it's the right thing for you to do, even just at that point, rather than when you graduate high school, you go to a 4-year university. That just being the end-all be-all of what you're going to do with your life. And especially with student loans, because then you kind of do have to do one thing.
Jake, you've touched on marketing a couple of times, and I don't think we actually got to how you actually market your product, where you're selling or who you're selling to, other than people that you've knocked on their doors.
Yeah, so we pay for 0 ads, and we really just tell our story. Social media has been a big one for us. Like I said, I have a love-hate relationship for it. We don't sell any ads, but we just tell people constantly what we're doing. We tell them about how we're raising our animals, and we really just focus on that. Word of mouth has probably been our biggest thing. About 90% of our clientele roll over every single year. And so they've been buying from us since 2015, and it just continues to grow. About the 10% of our clients fall off. They try it. It didn't work for them for a plethora of reasons and stuff. Either it was just the inconvenience of storage, because in Washington State, and the way that we do is what's called custom exempt, meaning that we actually sell cattle, giving folks a little knowledge for those that may not know, but the USDA, there's a USDA system, and then normally there's a state system. And we fall under the state system with custom exempt. And for all intents and purposes, we're actually selling them a live animal. So they get a share of that live animal. So we sell in halves, quarters, and wholes. With most of our clients going with half a beef, which feeds a family of 4, is kind of what we tell them, for about 220 meals out of the calendar year. So that meets all kind of their beef needs that we tell most folks. But with that, we're not able to sell. We currently are not in the USDA system that we're able to sell by the cut. So if someone gets hold of us and they want hey, I want a pound of hamburger, or I want a pack of sirloins, legally, I can't sell those to them. So in our state system, we can't do that. We are a big proponent. States like Montana have an intrastate program that they can sell. Producers can sell through their state system. They can sell direct to consumers in their state. And we are a huge proponent of that, and really hope that someday that kind of moves. The USDA system is a hard one because they have to be inspected. They're government inspectors and everything. And there's very, very limits on being able to get into USDA slaughter facilities, not only for the animals to be killed and harvested, but then for USDA cut and wrap. And all of those, just like we talked about the pipelines, there's a lot of loss and there's a lot of cost. And loss means cost for our producers. So the more that we end up having in there, the more expensive it gets. And so those $18 lamb chops that you were talking about, I believe, Kate, those just go up in cost when you start having to go through some of those processes. With that, we kind of tell these stories to our clients, but we kind of follow the Red Bull model. We kind of joke, if you ever watched a TED Talk or anything else on Red Bull, there is no Red Bull commercial talking about their energy drink. Instead, you just see Red Bull sponsored this guy that drove an airplane off a building, or a kid that flipped a bicycle, and all the cool stuff that goes with it. And so we kind of follow that same model. And we often share posts and stuff about what we're doing in a ranch and operation stuff, all the work that we're doing with fencing, all the work that we're doing with our livestock and everything else. We kind of let that speak for itself. And our clients like to know that the meat that they're eating and the products that they're eating, they like to know the backstory. When you buy something in a big box store, they don't know anything about that. They don't know anything about the producer. They don't know anything about their family. They don't know anything about the extras that they're doing. And we kind of talked about this, Cade and Arlene, earlier, that I really think the benefit with agriculture nationwide is all those other benefits that we're doing, the soil improvements, the work with the species, the habitat creation, all of those things. And so I think our clients have really bought into that. And ultimately, we only do one harvest in our operation. We offer both grass-fed, grass-finished, and also grass-fed, grain-finished. And there's always been kind of a bite in the industry of using that term grass-fed, that's kind of clean, that all cattle are grass-fed. But the thing that we tell folks, and it's true, all cattle, for all intents and purposes, are all grass-fed. That's kind of how it works as a general rule. But the difference that we do is our cattle stay on pasture their whole entire lives. We don't go to a feedlot setting or anything else. So when we say they're eating grass, they're actually eating grass that's growing right where it's at. We do feed hay. We're very open with that. We feed a lot of haylage is the products that we end up doing, which is fermented grass for all intents and purposes. And we feed a lot of that. We just get too much rain during the winter time. And then we do grass finished, which those guys get alfalfa for the last 60 days. And then our grass fed or our grain finished program, which about 90% of our clients want grain finished. We use drag feeders. So we actually feed them grain in their pastures. and we move those feeders about every 3 to 5 days as we're rotating pastures and keeping them on fresh grass. So they don't, unlike where I worked in Central Washington at a feedlot setting, they never go to confinement. They never go to any of that. And so it's just different. I'm not saying it's bad, worse, anything else. It's just how we raise them and what works for our operation and our setup and all of those. And we only do one harvest a year. So we only harvest in November. And the reason why we end up doing that is that way they've gone their whole 6 months of eating the best feed that they can without being on any sort of hay or anything else that we believe. And then they're harvested. And so in November, about November 1st, we budget for this year. If all the stars align, we'll be at November 15th ish. Cattle will start on feed. But we only do that one harvest a year, really, to what we believe produce a real consistent product for our customers. And like I said, we're not here to say it's the other way is something bad or anything else, but it's how we do it, and our customers enjoy that. The one last thing, I guess, Arlene, is some of our clients, we joke it's called our Cowfax report, but we track everything that our cattle do. As a good producer, record keeping's just part of the business. When you give shots, and we're not organic certified. We follow beef quality assurance standards and everything, and we use very few vaccines throughout the year and worming programs because we just rotate, and a lot of that solves a lot of those issues. But we track everything all the way from any medical treatments that we've provided, every single pasture move. And so some of our clients every year, they get their Cowfax report. We use a program called Cattle Max, and we just provide them that whole entire update for their cow. And so when they get something that comes to their table, when there's truly trust in production, this is your Carfax report for cows that tells you every pasture they've ever been in, every shot they've ever done, how much they weighed when they were born, how much they weighed in the fall. They get it all. So when they're eating something, they can have the utmost trust that what they're eating is good.
Jake, I'm sorry, as someone with little kids, I'm picturing getting like the daily daycare report, of like, this cow pooped at this time and peed at this time and ate 28 blades of this grass and ate 3 grasshoppers accidentally and took a nap and, ran around with the other cows for 10 minutes and bellered this many times and waved her tail around. And assuming your cows are like ours, that they, need a little playtime to kind of burn off some energy. But
Kate, when we worked on most of the operations, record keeping was the cow herds up in this pasture. Often how many, I don't know, we'll have to bring them back in and figure it out. But the cow herds up there and the yearling stalkers and stuff, they're out in the other pasture and that sort of stuff. Now with the advent of computers and even cell phones, we're able to update all of our data. I mean, as soon as I do a pasture move, I can hop on my cell phone, click a couple buttons, and I have that already done. And so it's made it super simple. It's made it super easy. But yeah, you are right. It's crazy what computers and technology have allowed us to kind of capture instead of those truck red book calf books that we had floating around in all of our vehicles. The end of winter, mom would normally yell at us or anything else about, hey, I can't read this or I can't read that or I don't understand or it doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's got coffee spilled on it, or yeah.
Jake, I'm wondering how you've seen the paperwork death trap that is my husband's driver's side visor, because that's where all the receipts and the like piece of paper with this note on it and whatever the hell else is up there. If you make the mistake of touching that visor and everything just avalanches down on you because it's the filing system.
So if the sun is shining in your eyes, you just have to deal with it, Katie?
There's enough gravel dust on his car, it doesn't usually get through the windshield anyway, but
we have the living room cardboard box that captures all of those. And I tip my hat to my wife that muddles through those come tax season as she ends up going through them. So I really tip my hat to her. I know it's a challenge.
I said we hired a CPA and it's been great because I would much rather just hand her a check than, now I can hand her the cardboard box and the check and she deals with it instead of me, which is nice.
That's right. I was just going to transition into the parenting side of what our podcast is all about, because we love to talk about cows, but we also like to talk about kids. So we usually end up asking this question to women, but I think it's important to ask it to the dads too, and especially because you did a 2-for-1. We ask a lot of our guests to reflect on the time when they first became parents. So when you're thinking back 16 years ago, what was that time and that transition point like for you and your wife, and for the how that impacted, what you were going to do with the rest of your life, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So both the wife and I are very analytical type folks, and we did not go into the decision of having kids lightly, and we understood exactly, or as best as you can. We did not sugarcoat those things. We kind of committed ourselves, and I tell new parents all the time, and some folks may see it differently, but we committed ourselves that, hey, the first couple of years are going to suck. Well, there's going to be moments of glory and everything else, but you're not going to get much sleep. You're going to have dirty diapers. You're going to be cleaning kiddos and throw up and all those other things. And there's truly moments of bliss and stuff where you get that little smile, or they say their first words, or doing that other stuff. But those first couple of years are going to be super hard. And so the wife and I went into that, and we kind of joked that communication, I've kind of stressed on about how important it is. And my wife said, hey, we'll do 2 kids. I can do 2 kids. That's going to be it. And so we kind of joked that having twins would be kind of funny. And so as a matter of fact, it's a knock on me, Arlene, and I'll take it. But the first ultrasound appointment, she goes, there's no reason to go. She goes, they're just going to look and go, yep, it's a thing. She called me up and she's like, well,
yeah, it's a blob.
She's like, I got something to tell you. And so, so we were blessed. That first bit, we were really concerned. It was a high risk set of twins up till about a month prior to us having them, and so we just had a lot of faith that things were going to work out good, and it did. We have 2 wonderful, wonderful daughters and stuff. Both came out healthy, and we spent the first week in the hospital. Me sleeping on a little tiny couch next to my wife some days, and her stressing it out there, wanting to get home. We have not, we made a commitment when we had the kids. One, my wife made it clear that she wanted to go back to work when she had the kids. And I fully support those decisions and stuff. Each of us have our own ways of doing stuff. And so she said, hey, I need to go back to work. We were blessed with their great grandmother took over watching them and really did an amazing job. I tip my hat. She passed away just this last year, and she did an amazing job raising them those first probably 6-8 years until they were running around and we describe as lighting fires. But once they kind of got running around, she really kind of set the groundwork, and that was amazing. Just the same, when our kids were 6 months old, we had made the commitment that our kids were not going to stop us. And so I think it's 6 months old with a set of twins. We took our kids to Yellowstone on a road trip from Washington State. And for 7 days with 2 6-month-olds, we took them to Yellowstone, which for all intents and purposes, for any new parents out there or anybody else, that's like suicide. But I can tell you that it also proved to the wife and I that like we can make anything work. And it was a great trip looking back. I remember packing our double stroller of them up and down 6 million stairs as we ended up going around Yellowstone, the wife on one side and me on the other. And look back on it, it's amazing that we did that. And just the same, we were building a shop at the time and everything. And I think my kids, if they ever suffer from hearing loss late in their life, it may be because they sat in their stroller or sat in a playpen near while we were building a shop or fixing a tractor or fixing a piece of equipment or anything else, because we have not allowed them to slow us down. And just the same, they've been part of the process. I touched base. We were talking about driving at the start of this, and I think our daughters were 6 years old, and they're driving the truck for all intents and purposes, which driving's a lightly said thing when you're picking up hay bales, because as the truck would go up the little bit of a grade, I'd have to run up and put on the gas because they couldn't steer and look out the window and even touch the pedals. So just kind of tut along. but it's been an amazing road with the kids being part of the operation. It's been an amazing opportunity to raise kids in the new generation that we are, and to kind of be able, I think, a little bit shape who they are, or at least the direction, the exposure, and the choices that they have to make. Because ultimately it's up to them and what decisions that they make, regardless of what we as parents, I think, tell them or say or anything else. It's really up to them. And so I think really our main thing is we have incorporated them. There's nothing that we hide from them about production. There's nothing that we hide from them about the hardships of this life. And often they're there when we're having these tough decisions about everything from coaling to how much money we're going to be making to what hay costs are this year to last. Even goofy things like what we're going to post on social media. We involve them in everything. So I couldn't ask for better. Just the same, it's been tough having kids. They're 16-year-old girls. Horses are a big part of, so we do a lot of cattle events. So we do team penning and sorting, which are horse and cattle events done in an arena normally, which is all about kind of working on moving cattle. And our daughters, my wife comes from a family that's been doing that as long as she's been raised. And I came from a ranching background. And so it kind of came as a natural sport for us. And our daughters have been doing it. I think they're on their fourth or fifth set of horses now, starting off on ponies and now going on to the big boy horses that they're taking over ours. And it's been an amazing road to watch them grow and continue to expand. And at the same time, sometimes that takes away from them being able to help out on the operation, as we as parents have to understand that sometimes the operation for us is business, and sometimes they have to have those life experiences if it involves, hey, going to a 4-H tryouts. And last night they were out doing performance riding and going to events while the wife and I were out doing chores. We as parents have to make those decisions to support that, or have made those decisions.
Arlene, it sounds like he's on your daughter's side.
Of what?
Terrible sad. With the showing, with the just letting them go show animals.
Yeah.
Instead of putting them back to work.
Yeah.
So,
Sure.
Jake, how much longer do you think my husband has to tell our almost 8-year-old daughter that he's never going to buy her a horse? Because she's a lot more persuasive than he is. And I think we're closing in on the end of the no horses thing around here.
Well, I mean, if you start using it to move cattle and sheep, then it's a working animal. Like, maybe there's more justification then.
Well, he wants to take her to an Amish auction in a few weeks that he insists they're not going to buy a horse at. But then I saw that there's a draft mule on there, so we'll see, because there's a draft mule listed as kid broke, and I feel like that might turn some tides.
Get a little cart and send them down the road.
I always find it funny. You mentioned about the differences between college and trade school, and it's kind of interesting. We talk about college, about how expensive it is for that education, and how maybe people might argue that it's not worth the amount of money that you pay for that education. And at the same time, here we are talking about a thing like horses, and I can tell you the amount of money that it takes to raise and support trailers and traveling around, and entry fees and feed and vet and shoeing and all of those type of things. It's often funny how we justify learning and education and the lessons that you take away. If I looked at college the same way sometimes as I do us having horses, I think I'd have a whole different perspective on things. And so I often, trust me, when we end up buying our alfalfa every year, I have to sit down and remind myself all the life lessons that are coming from that. So I'll say a little prayer for you, Kate, and your kiddo there, and the 8 years and the road that they're going down, the amount of money that's going to go into it. So unfortunately, I haven't seen any. I know there's college loans. I haven't seen horse loans.
Thank God for that. I was going to ask, though, have the horse has been worth it for what your kids have gotten out of it, or what your family's gotten out of it?
Different families do things different ways. I mean, if I lived in the city, I think even a simple chore like feeding a goldfish kind of teaches those kids and stuff that they have those responsibilities. I can tell you, when our daughters get up first thing in the morning, when their alarm clock goes off before they go to school, now at 16 years old, they're out working with their horses. And if you can't find them in the house, probably they're out there loping their horses around out in what I call the arena. My wife calls the parking lot at our house. That they're doing those things, or brushing them, or cleaning stalls, or anything else. That and even now they work at one of the local facilities cleaning stalls, and the owner of that facility said, man, you know what, these are some of the hardest working girls that I've ever met. And I think it's not always about the horse. I think often it's about all the life lessons and skills and understanding hard work, and sometimes even understanding such sad things as how to deal with loss. I mean, a couple of their horses have passed away and died, and they understand that process. Just like all of us, we don't have to like it, but they have an understanding of it and a respect. And so I think all of those, are the horses worth it? Yeah, the horses are worth it, but I think there's a bunch of different things. As long as you have something that's there to teach those lessons, worth every dollar.
So you were talking a bit about the fact that I think you said you have an off-farm job. Your wife does as well. The kids are involved in a lot of things. I know that the word balance can be, a tricky one to use, and maybe that's the wrong word, but how do you guys try and fit it all in and still have, a couple hours to sleep? And, I know that farmers sleep is one of those things that gets pushed to the side, but it's also important for us as humans. So how does your family make it all work?
Yeah, so the wife works for the state. She's been doing that pretty much our whole relationship, and then I work in law enforcement as my full time gig, and I've been doing that for almost 20 years. With both of us, it's really about communication. As far as, hey, what chores need done, we often talk about things days in advance. As far as, hey, what cattle moves need, where animals are at, what happens when an emergency happens. What can we drop? What can we not drop to get things done? It's about having that community that's there. The main thing that I tell folks is, if you work a job, you can go on vacation and take days off and do stuff like that from the job. And for all intents and purposes, that's fine. There'll be emails when you get back, or there might be messages that you need to return or whatever. In ranching, you really have to make those decisions about being gone and how those things are going to work out when you're away. Sometimes that's based on friends being able to keep eyes on things when we're gone. But the main thing for us, it's all about preventive medicine ahead of time. Every day we're trying to get 2-3 hours in working on a project, and it may be fixing a fence that hasn't broke yet. Many of the ranches that I worked on, the motto was, hey, you don't fix it until it's broke. I've learned I can't afford to do that. I've also learned many of the operations I worked on, it was the story about good enough, that we fixed it good enough and that it's working. What I've learned and what my grandfather stressed in me is to buy the best tools that your money can afford the first time, and you'll save yourself money in the end. And I often say I don't have time to do it the first time. If I don't have time to do it the first time, I definitely don't have time to do it a second time. And so, like, when we build fences, we only build fences as perfect as we can get them. Is there times when we piece stuff together with baling twine or whatever? Yeah, there is. But those are very, very few and far between. And often those 2-3 hours a day we go out there and we make sure that that's doing something that gets this done the first time. We also do a lot of preventive maintenance, and that kind of helps us as well.
Yeah, because fixing the fence in the rain at midnight when the cows are out is not the time to do your best job either, right? So then you're mad at your past self, and future self knows you're still going to have to come back and fix it better a third time, right?
And I think the other thing, Arlene, that we kind of give ourselves is we give ourselves grace. We give ourselves grace and stuff that we're not going to be able to do everything. I tip my hat to my wife. I really tip my hat to her that she's able to attend a ton of the kids' horse events and everything else. And often I'm spent working or doing stuff. And sometimes there's stuff that she can't go to that I'm able to, hey, let's split it up. I'll go take care of that. You got this chore that you need to get done or whatever. And we have to give each other grace and stuff that we're not able to do everything. And even going back, Kate, you mentioned it with the property owners. There's sometimes things that don't get done at the properties that we have to ask for grace from our property owners and tell them, hey, this came up, that came up, this broke, that broke. And we're open about that. And we tell those stories, and it's not making excuses. It's just saying that sometimes in life we have to recognize we can't do everything. And so you talked about how do you balance it, Arlene? And you even alluded that that's kind of a rough thing. I like to describe it as juggling, because I suck at juggling and drop a lot of balls. And the reality is we drop a lot of balls. But the main thing is we pick them up and we keep trying, and we learn from it, and we try to do better.
And I think sometimes we don't juggle the balls that are most important, right? If we're going to drop it, maybe that one's the one that's going to be the priority for today, and the other balls are going to fall. But yeah, you have to prioritize too.
So, Jake, what's your favorite thing been about raising your girls on the ranch? And I want to know about this parking lot thing. Are there cars in there, or are you parking horses in there?
No. It often ends up being, hey, where do we unload the tractor, or where do we park? And yeah, I didn't have time to move the tractor, or I made Arlene having the grace and stuff. It's talking about, hey, Papa cheated and didn't move the tractor and spend that amount of time. So we'll laugh at him, or maybe it's a pile of posts.
Like when you try to keep a surface clean in your house, right? It's like you can try for a while, but it's a big empty space, and stuff's gonna get put there.
Yeah, it's completely like any farmhouse and stuff. It's not perfect. Between dogs running in and out, and kids running in and out, and cleaning saddles in living rooms, and us coming in from school and tossing stuff on the counters, it's a constant battle. I was trying to think, Kate, what the most favorite thing about raising my daughters on in this lifestyle is. And I think it's about I think if I was to take a second and stuff, I think the main thing is it's about recognizing that stuff doesn't always work out, but you have to move forward. I tell my daughters all the time, one of the things I stress with them, if it's competition or building a project or putting something together, I stress what I call the littles. And I say, hey, work on the littles. And it might not be, if you're doing horse stuff, it's not about how fast you run, or it might maybe just, hey, speed things up and work on a better turn, or it may be getting the right lead. Or if it's with the cattle, it might be, hey, did we manage the grass height just perfect? Could we have moved them a day early? Did we put a gate in the right location? Can we move that? Can we improve that location? Work on the littles. And often in stuff, when we kind of look at stuff and break it down as much as those littles, when stuff goes wrong, which it does, in ranching, it goes wrong all the time. If it's equipment breaking down or whatever, it's how you overcome that. If it's cows that don't want to cooperate going in through the corral or whatever. And I'm not perfect with teaching those lessons often. But I think when my daughters look back and stuff, I hope that that's one of the things that they take away, is that they learned how to overcome a lot of obstacles. And sometimes I think we try to, as parents, eliminate all the obstacles in our kids' life. And I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned in life by having the kids go through some of those obstacles with us, and understanding that, hey, we're going to make it. Let's have a little faith. And we're going to continue to work through this. And it might not work out the first time. It may not work out the second time, or it may have worked out just perfect. But I think teaching my kids that failure is okay, and to keep working on those littles. I think that's my big takeaways.
And then, what's your biggest parenting struggle?
I think you asked this early. You said this earlier and stuff, that sometimes you ask questions of wives, and that you'd give me the grace to ask me. And I think my biggest thing as a father that I struggle with is, I'm blessed. My wife gets to participate in a ton of our daughter's stuff, and I have to kind of give myself some grace sometimes, recognizing that she does that. At the same time, I'm incredibly jealous. Unfortunately, with choosing this lifestyle, I've missed out on a lot. Um, it, I have not found the perfect way to make that all balance out, that I can be at every event, that I can go to everything, that every time they go on a road trip that I get to go on with them. There's no perfect way to build this lifestyle. And especially as a first generation um, folk trying to build this from the ground up. I mean, we didn't inherit anything, from a truck to a trailer to a corral panel to anything. Everything that we have is stuff that we've built in the years. And I'm not bragging about that or anything else. It's came with cost. And often that cost is really on the back of our kids. It's on the back of us as parents making trade-offs. And we have to have enough grace to recognize that that's okay. But that's been my biggest struggle, is having twins. I only got one chance to do it right. And I can't say as a parent, I've always done it right. And Ben will make it to every event that I wanted to and get to see every moment and every struggle and every lesson. And so I think that's been my biggest struggle as a parent.
I just want to say, Jake, as a fellow parent and farmer, that we have talked before on the show about the fact that there's no right way to farm, and you talked about that earlier, and there's definitely no right way to parent, and none of us are doing it right even every day. Sometimes we do it right in a minute, but like an hour from now, I'm gonna mess up again, right? But I think our kids are more generous than we probably give them credit for, in terms of recognizing the fact that, well, I hope anyway, when they look back in their lives, that they're gonna see all the times that we were there. And you said, you involved them in the ranch and in the work that you're doing, and maybe you missed a competition, but you were there when it mattered. So I hope that when you talk about giving yourself grace, that you are actually doing it, because I think that's really important, to not be too hard on yourself.
I will say, too, it makes me really happy how many dads we see acknowledging that they missed a lot of stuff with their kids. And I mean, moms too, but dads especially, because I think culturally there's been such a, my dad never went to anything and I'm fine, and I never went to therapy and I'm fine. And I'm like, maybe your dad wanted to come to shit and he just couldn't. And, and maybe some of them really didn't want to. I personally have never, but I've heard that there are people who have gotten roped into kids' events that they would have rather poked themselves in the eye than have to attend.
You'll get there, Katie. Your kids just aren't old enough yet.
Now I love listening to the 4th and 5th graders sing, Arlene. On and on and on. Jake, the other thing I think about a lot in life is one of Temple Grandin's books. She talks about an animal handling system where their goal was, 100% compliance and 100% perfection at all times. And it never even got close, because nobody can do that. It's not possible. And she said they knocked their compliance rate down to like 95% or something. That was their goal, was 95%. And they found that if they lowered the goal to 95%, they would get above 98% compliance. But if they set the goal to 100%, they got like 80% compliance, because nobody even tried, because you can't do it. And I try to remind myself of that in parenting, that if I can look back and say, I did as well as I could today in this situation with these children, with this weather, with this money, whatever, because that changes from second to second. I know other people's kids get hangry like mine do, and I know that other parents get overwhelmed and hangry like I do. And, but if you can honestly say that you did as well as you could, and you teach your kids to expect that from themselves and from others as well, then that's really all you can do. And if you actually are 100% perfect 100% of the time, we'd like to have you on so you can tell us about how the hell you're doing it, and or why you're such a liar, pants on fire.
Yeah. We haven't met that guest yet.
Yeah.
No, even in production agriculture, one of the things they talk about is, we talk about even like just a simple concept like calving percentage and stuff. How many of your mother cows, from the time that they're bred to the time that they calve, what percentage of those carry a live birth? And we always try to strive and stuff for the high 90s and everything. And heck, as a producer, if you're hitting 95%, some folks would argue you're doing amazing. And what folks will often say is, man, to jump from whatever that high percentage is that you may be, that acceptable, whatever that is for your production system, if it's 95%, if it's 92, it may be even 90, what does the extra cost come from going up to 100? And what you often find is that curve becomes insanely steep. And as parents and stuff, I don't think it's good for our well-being sometimes to worry about that last little bit of the curve. And sometimes we have to take time for ourselves. And sometimes that's time for our partners, and time for our marriage, and time for our house, and time for all those other wonderful things that we have to talk about and take care of.
All right. So we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up to ensure that you win.
I think if it was a category, it'd be about ranching for conservation, or working lands for wildlife. One of those type of concepts about, hey, how are you doing something more with whatever you're doing? And that doesn't mean if it's your farm, it doesn't mean if it's your ranch or whatever, but what added benefit are you adding to that property? I think too often we just focus on what we're producing, that, hey, I want to be the best steak guy, or I want to be the best producer of cows. And if we only focus on that one thing, sometimes other stuff sacrifices. And so I think if there's one thing that I'd like to be winning the category, if it was, or even competing in the category, it was, hey, how am I not only producing product that I'm able to sell in my local communities, but what other benefits am I providing, and what does that look like? And how am I kind of producing that for the greater good? Because that's going to be there after I'm gone.
I like that one a lot because, probably a third of our productive ground on our farm is in conservation prairie. And there are days where we look at it and we're like, shit, we could, if we could get out of that contract, because it is a signed contract with the federal government, which means that you're not getting out of it. You can. It's just real expensive. We could plant more corn in there, we could put more cows on there, whatever. And the government is paying us, so it's not just sitting there empty, which is amazing. And B, at this point, if we tilled it under and, especially if we cropped it, we'd know we weren't doing the best thing for that soil. And that would really be killer. So, maybe we could raise a few more cows, but we wouldn't have the coolest birds in the neighborhood, and we wouldn't have folks wanting to come out pheasant hunting because we've got the only pheasants in the neighborhood. Or, we'd still have deer, but we'd probably be a lot angrier about them than we are now.
Well, and we even tell we're never here to, one of the things I really stress and stuff, I'm a rancher, and that's kind of what I've came from. I'm not a tractor farmer and raise crops. But one of the things that I always try to look at is, man, what benefits are those producers bring in? And we end up seeing those often in our area. We have sacrifice crops. So like our corn producers, they'll leave strips solely for wildlife at the edges of their field and stuff, and they'll rotate those areas. They don't need to do that. That doesn't make sense from a business standpoint. That doesn't make sense from many of those standpoints. Even such things as just cover cropping those crops to kind of stop soil erosion or help infiltration of water, all those things that even crop farmers are doing that I think often goes unsaid. We see tons of that sort of stuff that's going on in our local community. And I see it as I travel across the country and stuff. We see what folks are doing in different areas. And so I really kind of tip my hat to all of these producers. I think that often we always tote ourselves for raising the best steak or the best ear of corn. And I really think that we kind of undervalue all the added benefits that we produce as producers on the ground.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at the various things that we're doing, right? Not just to what we consider our end product, right? Hopefully we're all leaving a legacy, and whether that's for our kids or someone else's kids, we want people to be farming the ground. Hopefully, development is is out there too, but if the desire is for this ground that we're using to continue into the future, that we want that other people to be able to use it for whatever they end up using it for.
I think too, and Arlene, I promise this is the last thing I will interject, is that we tend to really undervalue experimentation, from a entertainment standpoint for our kids. I know we were talking about this with drones the other day, but the cost of putting on cover crops versus the entertainment my kids have gotten from pulling turnips out is, I think it's a wash, really. They're pretty damn excited about those turnips. And also just the experience and energy and engagement that it teaches our children and the rest of our community to see people trying new things and willingly, happily trying different things. And if it doesn't work, you go, that didn't work. And there are very, very, very few things where you can't walk it back and go, we tried cover crops. This cover crop didn't work on this ground for us this year. And then next year, you just don't put it on. Like, it's not a permanent life decision, you know? But it's good for people to see other people trying new shit, whether it works or not.
I think that I'm going to skip our cussing and discussing for this week because I feel like we kind of did it already. And I'm just going to ask you, Jake, if you want to share where people can find you. I don't even know if in this whole episode we actually said the name of your ranch. So start with that. Where can we find you online if people want to get in touch or see some of the pictures you were talking about? And also just want to thank you for joining us today.
Good deal. So Jake Yancey, our ranch is Tracking Y. That's letter Y Ranch. We're in Western Washington, Olympia, Washington. You can find us at www.trackingyranch.com. We're also on Facebook as well as Instagram under the same handle, Tracking Y Ranch. So yeah, all of those locations you can end up finding us at. Oh, and then we also have, we post a little bit to YouTube as well, under Tracking Y Ranch as well. So a couple of our videos on how-tos and stuff like that are there.
Perfect. All the places. Thank you so much. It was great chatting with you today.
You as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Arlene.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.